of a police officer kicking a man in the head at Manchester Airport have undermined public confidence in the police and raised questions about how they are trained. Well, Sky News has been given access to a new training programme which is designed to help officers calm difficult situations and use force safely when it's really necessary. Well, to discuss this, joined this morning by David Spencer, Head of Crime and Justice at Policy Exchange, former Detective and Chief Inspector and Met Police as well. Thank you so much for your time. Your thoughts on this new proposal and what it might achieve, first of all?
Well, policing's a pretty tough job. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. And what's difficult is getting policing training right, because in the classroom, it can never really compare what it's like on the street. So the closest that's possible is this, what's called scenario-based training. And this training that the College of Policing have rolled out is probably as good as it's going to get in the sort of false situation of a classroom. So it is a step forward.
A step forward, but is it not a step that should have been taken some time ago?
Yeah, and there's no doubt that that's true, that it should have been. But, you know, this is all about progress. And I think it's positive that the College of Policing have done this. And you know, a lot of people are quite critical of the College of Policing and have been in the past. I think under their new, or certainly current leadership, this is the sort of step which is really positive and should be welcomed.
You were at the Metropolitan Police previously. Do you think, and if so, to what degree, we are seeing a change in the situations that officers are responding to? Are we seeing more violent situations? Are we seeing them having to use force more than perhaps was used in the past?
Well, we're certainly seeing them more. So it's very, very good. When I started in policing 20 years ago, there were no smartphones, no video cameras. That sort of thing was very, very unusual. Now, every single incident that a police officer goes to pretty much will be filmed, put on social media, and obviously that means the world gets to see it. So we're certainly seeing these things more often. Whether they're happening more often, I think, is another question.
With all the training in the world, you made that reference to real-world situations and classroom situations, all the training in the world, to what degree does that stick with the officer in an instance like, for example, Manchester? There's no rule books, there's nobody going to say time out at the end of it. There's no knowledge of what's coming up next. You're not being told what the scenario is. In those moments, how much can officers rely on training and how much do we have to rely on them being clear-headed, decent human beings who can act in the right way?
Well, of course, the important thing is that there are rule books and there are huge amounts of law, legislation, and rules that go along with the use of force. I think that's really important. But the reality is that real life on the street policing is always going to be different from the classroom. And that's why it's so important that we get recruitment right, we get vetting right, and that's why this sort of change is necessary all the time. I think my biggest concern is that there are, although this training's been rolled out to most police forces, there are still a couple that haven't done that yet, and those chief constables really need to look closely at that, because they are putting their own officers and the public at more risk if they don't catch up with this.
I'm sure many people will be listening to this conversation thinking about the riots that we've seen in recent days and over the past week or so. And statistics of officers with lacerations, bruises, broken bones, the amount of force often being used against officers in situations like that, they're somewhat rarer. Some people would argue, well, hang on a second, actually, an officer has every right to deploy force. Well, maybe they should be, in some instances, more forceful.
Well, they do have the right, and in fact, at times are obligated to use force, but they have to use force which is reasonable and necessary in the circumstances. And that depends what the officer is facing at the time. So if, as we've seen on our screens over the last couple of weeks, if they're facing a very violent disorder, then absolutely officers should be using force. If officers are dealing with a different situation, then actually being able to de-escalate is the way it's described, but communicate better with a member of the public so they don't need to use force. That's a good thing.
And do you think, on the whole, that compared to other countries, the UK has got it about right? Obviously, lots of talk in the United States, for example, about the number of police shootings. Other countries, their police officers are viewed in particularly detrimental ways. Do you think the UK is roughly in the right place?
There's always things that can be done better. There's always ways that policing can improve. My own view, British policing is amongst the best in the world. And it's as simple as that.
David Spencer, Head of Crime and Justice at Policy Exchange. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.